You're listening to Ecto Portal, a journey into the unknown with Anthony Anderson and Verna Wilson.
I hope that you are seated comfortably with the light turned down and the curtains drawn.
Hello, once again, to another journey into the unexplored, the unexplained Ecto Portal. I'm Anthony Anderson, your host, and I'm here with my co-host,
Verna Wilson.
And today's episode, Verna, is a phenomenon that some people experience. I actually have my own variation of this same experience. It's called third man syndrome. And we'll go into it in a little bit more detail, but it's an interesting phenomenon that a lot of people have in different situations, and when you least expect it. Some of them are stressful, some of them are during important decision-making moments, or even danger. Some have been dangerous situations. This phenomenon will actually happen to people.
Or maybe maybe you're just a weirdo.
Or maybe you're just a weirdo. That's true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
But you've never been called that, so.
Oh, of course not.
No,
of course not.
Never.
All right. So, what have you done lately? Anything fun?
Anything fun?
Yeah.
Well, just besides seeing my boyfriend and friends, we've been doing that.
Okay.
We go to dinner. We go to the ice cream shop afterwards. We watch
Okay.
movies, and then let's see. I work, and then I take care of my cats. And I draw and I write in my spare time. But that's fun for me.
That's all that matters. That's fun for you.
Yeah.
I've been working on our website. Obviously, we're getting episodes ready.
Oh, yeah. I've been looking up episodes. Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of our daily TikTok, a little short TikTok videos, just to kind of tie in with our podcast and our website, just to kind of keep things interesting. They're not really videos about our podcasts. Most of them, they're just sort of little tidbits and facts and paranormal, sometimes related things.
Because sometimes something interesting doesn't have to be a whole show. It's just a fact to talk about.
Exactly. And I mean, the stuff I talk about, they're the kinds of things we would talk about on our show.
And also it's the kind of things we would talk about off the show.
Yeah.
Because we're interested in this type of thing, and and sometimes we would bring something up on our own conversations. So of course, you're going to bring what you like doing to the show.
Yeah. And some of them, I mean, most of them have a paranormal slant. Sometimes they're just weird history, fascinating history. Some are true crime related with paranormal. Some are just true crime and history. There's kind of a hodgepodge of all those together.
Sure.
But yeah, I find it interesting things that I thought, oh, that'll make a good little video. Because sometimes I think it's interesting to have content, but not necessarily the same content we would have in this podcast.
I'd like to see a little video short where it's a short little fact about something unexplained in your own life, too.
Oh, like personal story? We should do some of those.
We should do some of those
that's a good idea.
Because I think you and I and a lot of friends of ours have had so many experiences we can't explain, but it's not really a whole show.
Yep, exactly.
But we just talk about strange little things that's happened.
Yep.
And I think that we're a prime. I think anyway, we have a prime audience that's open to listening to that, and I think sometimes a personal story is the best.
Yeah. In fact, we just did our first 10-minute TikTok episode.
Oh yeah.
Where we talk about superstitions. I think that might be a good place to do some of those personal stories where one person tells a story and then we discuss it.
That would be great.
So maybe we'll do some of those in some future TikTok episodes as well.
Yeah, because I know that on some of the shows, we've actually told our own story in between talking about a subject because it related to the subject we were talking about.
Yeah, relations, exactly.
Right.
Something happened that's similar, we experienced or saw something. Or
So a little TikTok short would be great.
Yeah, that seems like the good place for it, I think. All right, what do you say we do the paranormal news?
Let's do it.
All right. Okay, and welcome back to the paranormal news. So what have you got this week, Verna?
Well, I have a story about what they call a feral child.
Ooh.
His name was Caspar Hauser, and apparently they don't know how he died. It's still a mystery.
Do you know, is this Germany? Is this where this is?
Well, it was. It happened in 1828, and it was the German city of Nuremberg.
Oh, Nuremberg. Okay.
Right, and a confused boy. He wandered the streets of the city, and nobody knew who he was, and he became famous before he became famous before he tragically died.
Okay.
He was unable to write or read his own name, except for his own name. He was able to tell his own name. And his strange personality and lack of table manners baffled everybody who came into contact with him. So one of the letters appeared to be from Caspar's mother, and it claimed that his father was no longer alive, that he should be joining the military. And another letter that they found on him was addressed to a cavalry officer asking him to take Caspar into his care. So within a matter of weeks, he appeared to be able to learn to read and write, and his fame attracted attention to the point where he published an autobiography. And the book claimed that he'd grown up sleeping in a small room on a bed of straw, fed only by strangers.
What?
Yeah, and there was an interest in his life, and in 1878, the Overland Monthly and Out West magazine in California just talked about him, which I'm familiar with those antique magazines.
Yeah.
The magazine read, "One of the strangest stories of the century is that of Caspar Hauser. For a quarter of a century, 1828 to 1853, it is doubtful if any single individual in all Europe with so much disgust or awoke on a great interest and curiosity." And here's a picture of him where he looks kind of...
He looks sort of normal, though.
He looks kind of normal right there. And there's actually a statue of him in Nuremberg. Here he is.
Interesting.
And it's the statue where he looks pretty downtrodden there.
We were almost going to take a day trip to Nuremberg when we were there, but
I'd like to visit Nuremberg. I'd like to visit Germany anyway, but I know you've been there.
Mm-hmm.
So the newspapers on both sides of the ocean were talked about him. Pamphlets and books were printed about him. Thinking about the theory of his birth and belongings.
So was he just famous because of his condition, pretty much?
Pretty much because of his condition. And the story still remained of interest even into modern times. And in 1874, director Werner Herzog released The Enigma of Caspar Hauser.
I didn't know that Werner Herzog
I'd never seen that. So while the tale of a supposedly feral boy attracted interest, various theories about who he was seem to have emerged.
Yeah.
Some believe he was of royal blood and was stolen from the Baden household, though this was later proven to be false. And as his fame actually grew, he claimed he was repeatedly attacked, but those he was placed in reportedly grew frustrated with his frequent lies, and even he admitted that he once shot himself. So he eventually died in 1833 at only the age of 21 after appearing with a stab wound and claiming to have been attacked. Found at the scene was a handwritten note from the supposed assailant, but no second set of footprints in the December snow in Bavaria. So they couldn't find out who it was because there was no evidence.
Wait, he said he shot himself, but this was a different incident?
Apparently, there was a note from somebody who shot him instead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it appears that he stabbed himself for the attention of the attack, but apparently he injured himself to the point of death.
Oh my God.
I don't know why he would want that kind of attention. That sounds really weird.
What's interesting though?
Yeah.
Is especially from like the late 1700s and early 1800s, you think people who were feral were generally locked away in asylums because they would hurt themselves or others. It's unusual that this kid was allowed to just live freely with other people. He must have had
and they found a note.
But he must have had an interesting personality. That's why people kept him around. There must have been something about him that was
something
different.
about him.
Yeah.
And they found a note, and also we don't. There was no psychology back then. In modern psychology, it could have been that he was mentally, or that he was somebody that they couldn't cope with. So
who knows? Maybe it's ADHD. Maybe it was a chemical imbalance.
A chemical imbalance. Right.
Today we would have medication and things that might help him a lot better, or it could be like almost a retardation.
Right.
We just don't know.
We don't know why.
I have to look up that
But
movie
apparently
now.
he was smart enough later to write his autobiography.
Yeah,
but
so
the fact that he wanted attention by
stabbing
himself
yeah.
is
yeah.
means that he
I
still
could
had
do that.
problems.
I don't think I could do that.
Stab yourself?
Yeah,
That you have to have problems if you do that.
Why would you do that?
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're desperate for attention, there's no other way out, I guess.
And I think today also we might be able to trace his origins a little bit more than back then. Back then, forget
or at least figure out maybe what led to it, or if there was anything that led to it. Maybe
and
it
there's
wasn't.
also blood DNA.
Yeah, blood DNA, exactly. Maybe we can find out if he did come from that royal family.
There you go.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, mine is very, very different. It's about a haunted house located near Blackpool in England. A woman said to have lived alongside ghosts when she moved back in with her parents after she traveled the world. She shared her story with her daughter, how her mother, a former professional ice skater, always felt a little off as soon as she stepped back into her parents' house. She said her mom's encounter says she experienced numerous strange incidents, including strange noises, things appearing to have moved around the house when no one had touched them, the sounds of a party next door, when the building adjoining them was a bank that was closed in the evenings. Now, the skeptical daughter said, well, her mother traveled the world for a few years when she was 18 or 19. This would have been in the mid-70s, and she quit ice skating and moved back in with her parents, and they lived in a flat above a shop in a small seaside town called Cleveleys. It's about a 10-minute drive from Blackpool. She said when she moved in, she said right away she felt off, and that she never felt scared. It was just kind of a different feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And that for the first time, anything strange that happened was a few days after she moved in. She was fast asleep in her bed, and her father came in and gave her a cup of tea, said something along the lines of, "Oh, did you fall back asleep?" And she said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, I heard you get up, and I heard the bathroom door open and close and footsteps." And the daughter said that her mother told her a few days later that she walked into the back room, and it was thick with pipe smoke, and that no one was in the flat smoked, and that from then on, the smell of pipe smoke, an unexplained appearance of pipe smoke, happened on a regular basis. The mother also told her daughter that things would always move around the house all the time, so if you laid keys down on a table and went to get them, they'd be missing. And the daughter said, well, the weirdest thing she said was occasionally they would hear what sounded like a party going on next door in the middle of the night, loud music, people singing, having a good time, laughing, and then that would be it. It would just stop. And the only issue is that, of course, the building was a bank, which was closed at night, so there's no other place to have a party. The former ice skater said that when she asked the landlord about the strange goings on, he said that it was strange that she mentioned the pipe smoke in the back room because the landlord's father used to smoke a pipe and died in the back bedroom. And the daughter said, well, there's one more thing that she wasn't sure about mentioning, and it's not really to do with ghosts, and it makes her mother sound a bit crazy. She said that at the time when she lived in the flat, she could tell who was going to call her before the phone rang or someone was at the door. She says she's very skeptical about that, and she can understand ghosts but have never heard of anything like that before. One person who commented on this particular story said they didn't think their mother sounded crazy, that they have extrasensory abilities, and this thing does happen often, and was fascinated about the haunted flat. Another one said happens in people in texts all the time, when someone will think about someone just before they text them. So it is common. I mean, I've heard of that too, where you're thinking about someone and they do call you.
That happened the other day to me.
Yeah. So it's an interesting phenomenon that I don't think anybody can truly explain.
Right.
I wouldn't say it's nothing to do with ghosts. I think that's
No.
more along the lines of
That's intuition and
something with our minds, something intuition, something
Right.
we don't understand.
no, but I think we're all born with that, and some of us have it higher than a lot more of a pronounced intuition than others. But that's happened all my life, where I'm thinking about somebody and suddenly they'll call or they'll come by.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to remark about the smoke.
Yeah.
You and I investigated a place, a lodge in Golden Gate Park, and
Oh yeah, McLaren Lodge.
McLaren Lodge,
Yeah.
and we went near the fireplace. We went
Yep.
near, and there was cigarette smoke, and
That was tobacco. It was a
it
pipe.
was tobacco. It was a pipe smoke, just like
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
And we asked the people who normally work there, who was actually around,
Yeah.
and we said, "Does this happen?" They said no, and they smelled it too, and they were baffled.
But
Remember when that happened?
But you remember what he did tell us?
What?
That fireplace, which is now part of it's like an open meeting room, but at
Sure.
the time, McLaren, who built the lodge, that used to be his office. That was the fireplace.
Oh,
next
right,
to
right.
his
I do
desk,
remember that.
And
Yeah.
he used to smoke his pipe in that room.
I remember that now. Yeah.
But what's weird is when we investigated, there was no smell, and then after a while, there was the smell, and
Right.
then it disappeared again.
It's almost as if he was there to find out, to
Checking it out.
check it out, and then
Who are these people
and then
in my lodge?
they're looking around. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm lost interest, left.
Yeah, that was an interesting experience. It's funny because when I lived in the Castro a few years ago, 10 years ago, remember, I think I've already told you this story before, where my neighbor is upstairs and he is a heavy smoker. He smoked cigarettes all the time, and his bedroom was right above mine. And one weekend I was home alone. My roommate had left town for the weekend. It was just me, and the building was really quiet. And I was in my room and I go, wow, I'm just really smelling cigarette smoke. And I kept hearing someone move around upstairs, and I thought, oh, my roommate or my neighbor upstairs is obviously smoking up again in the morning. It was always in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was a Friday night, and then the next Saturday, and then the next day Sunday, there it is in the morning, moving around, smoking. I could smell the smoke. And then on Sunday I went out, and he was outside, and I said, oh yeah, hey, oh yeah, I smelled some of your cigarette smoke. I just figured you were smoking when you got up in the morning. He said, I haven't been gone all weekend. No one's been home.
Oh, that's crazy.
I go, what do you mean? I hear someone moving around your bedroom every morning and I smell the smoke or smell the cigarette smoke. He said, I've not been home. He goes, I didn't know you could smell my cigarette smoke, but I've not been home at all. And I said, wow, because I explained it to him. He thought, wow, that's really weird. So,
Did you ever smell it again, or that was the only time?
on and off. And
Interesting.
then I just but I never knew whether he was home or not, so I didn't really, you can't really tell. But that one instance where he said, "Oh, I've been gone all weekend. My roommate's been back east." So
You thought, oh, that's
who's smoking upstairs?
then who's smoking, or where's that coming from?
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
All right, folks, there you go. There's the paranormal news, and we'll be right back with Third Man Syndrome. Okay, guys. As I mentioned before, this week's episode is about Third Man Syndrome, and I'll describe what it is, but I'm not so sure why it's called Third Man Syndrome to begin with. But I'll let you digress after I get done. All right. So essentially, Third Man Syndrome, also called Third Man Factor, is a phenomenon that occurs in times of distress and crisis. It's a feeling that there's another person or entity there alongside you, even though you're all alone. Now, people report feeling, hearing, or even seeing this third man who acts as a voice of comfort and support in an otherwise horrifying time, or literally saves their life. So the term Third Man Syndrome comes from the T.S. Eliot poem, The Wasteland. The poem was inspired by the real-life experience, of course, of Ernest Shackleton, an Irish explorer who went on a near-death expedition in Antarctica in 1916. After their ship got trapped in the ice, he and two other members of his crew made a 36-hour trek across the Arctic over mountains and glaciers to a whaling station. Now, during that time, several members of his three-man team, Ernest included, kept feeling like there was a fourth man alongside them. T.S. Eliot wrote this stanza inspired by that poem. Now, what I think is interesting here is maybe it's a generic term like third man syndrome. But I mean, if you're by yourself and feel like there's one other person there that you can't see that's with you, why is it called third man syndrome?
Because people can't explain it. That's why. Sometimes
is that what that is about?
Sometimes for people who believe in the spirit world, it could be a guardian angel or a relative or somebody who's coming to comfort them, and they don't know.
But
they
would
know
that be still two? It's you and that person, that other guardian angel, right?
That's a two. That would be two.
So why is it called third?
I have no idea.
I just thought that was a little unusual. I was thinking about it, trying to figure out why does it mean third. Then I thought, well, maybe it's third person. Like that entity that you can't see is so far outside, but yet connected right there. That's almost like a third person.
Well, think about it. During times of highly emotional stress,
yeah.
Sometimes your intuition or your anxiety, your intuition, and everything is amplified. So sometimes you can feel something that's out of the ordinary around you during times like that.
Oh.
So I'm not surprised that people have felt it, and they felt it more keenly when they're stressed and when they're going through troubling times.
I could see calling it other man syndrome.
Other man syndrome sounds more
logical?
More logical than third man, but
yeah. Or unknown syndrome. Unknown man, unknown person, unknown entity.
Unless it means that you're with another person and somebody mysteriously seems to be in the room.
And they said people who are by themselves have this feeling of someone's next to them.
Right, so that means third man doesn't make much sense. Yeah.
But anyway, my experience with third man syndrome, and I probably have relayed the story to you somewhere amongst our 7-10 years.
Right.
It was when I lived back in Washington. I had a roommate I lived with. He had a house, and he had this old garage door opener. It was really old. It's like early 80s. It was really heavy, made of hard, heavy plywood, layers, and there was like metal frame inside of it, and it was really heavy, and it was on a track, of course. If you push the button, and it rolled up on the track, and then it rolled back down if you were closing it. Mm-hmm. Well, in this particular instance, the garage was closed, and his car was in the garage. The top of his car was off, but the windows were rolled up. It's a little small car. We go in. He hits the button to open the garage. The door starts to go up, and it falls off one side of the tracks on the right side and kind of dangles there. And he's like, oh, crap. This happened to him before repeatedly, where he'd have to literally lift the garage door back onto the track. And the garage door is hundreds of pounds. It's really heavy. So he could never do it by himself. So I said, okay, I'll help you. So he said, well, come over by the driver's side and stand right next to the driver's window, and you hold it up while I guide it back onto the track. So he's guiding it back onto the track, and I'm lifting it up, and it's really heavy, really, really heavy. And he stops, and then I hear someone in my left ear loudly, a male voice say, "Move." And it wasn't like could you move? It was, "Move now." And that was the tone of voice, "Move." And I heard it, and it jolted me, but I followed the advice, and I moved away, and it came crashing down and smashed his driver's side window.
Yikes!
And he turned completely white, and he was so apologetic and scared, and we both realized I would have been crushed to death.
Oh my gosh!
By that garage on top of that window had I stayed there.
I'm so glad you got the warning.
I know, but it shook me up for a while.
I can imagine.
I'm sure I must have told him that the voice said "move," and I don't know.
Were you believed?
I think he was too shaken up to even
think about it. Yeah.
But I was more like, wow. I mean, obviously, could have died in this loud voice clearly in my left ear said "move." So to me, that's kind of third man syndrome. I know there's another person, so that would be third man syndrome because there was two of us there.
Right.
So, but that was my personal experience. Have you ever had anything like that happen?
I have many times.
What have you had?
Well,
do you have an incident?
Not any particular one that I could explain right now.
Okay.
But I just remember.
But you've had those.
Oh, many times where I'm
You
doing
know somebody's there.
and I've heard a voice tell me
Okay.
something
Okay.
many times. Not anything real dramatic, but
Yeah.
like, okay, take for example when I'm worrying about something.
Yeah.
I've had a voice tell me you're going to be. I've actually heard a voice tell me you'll be okay.
Mhm.
And I look
Reassuring.
around, and I knew it was a voice outside of me, and it was a man's voice.
Yep, and there's no one else around.
Right. Actually, the past few months, I've actually had a voice when I've been worried about something.
Yeah.
I had a voice tell me you'll be okay. And so somebody is
Someone's looking out.
Somebody's looking out for me.
That's
Yeah.
good. That's good. And I've had this particular third man syndrome come up again when I was in New York and almost got hit by a car,
Ouch.
and I was told to start running faster.
I'm glad you have somebody looking after you.
It doesn't happen very often, but when it happens, it's under stressful, dangerous
stressful
situations. Yeah.
So, as I mentioned before, some people bring it as their guardian angel, or some people say it's somebody who's familiar with them, a relative, somebody, an ancestor, and they're watching over them.
Yeah.
Or
They only step in when they absolutely think they have to.
right, and then some people call it spirit guides.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so here's some comments on this particular story from other people who made comments after they read this story.
Okay.
Someone says, when I was young, around 9 years old, I had to have pretty major surgeries for a birth defect. I was feeling sick, in pain, and frustrated about not being able to sleep or get out of bed. When I rang the bell for the night nurses to help me to the toilet, a smiling man, dressed all in white, would come straight away and help me. He was so happy and peaceful, with the biggest smile and a bright aura to him. He always came straight to me as soon as the bell rang. The next day, after the second night of his help, I asked another nurse if he would be on duty that night, and the staff was very confused. Even after my description of him, she told me there weren't any male staffers on duty that those past 2 nights, and that none of the porters or other staff were all white or would have been answering bells on the ward.
Oh, that's when they have an appearance of somebody.
Yeah.
Okay,
Remember I mentioned my mom in the hospice had that?
Right, you told me that,
the
but
priest?
I've had something like that happen where a person actually came to help me rather than just hearing or feeling somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's another person. I once fell about 10 feet from a ledge overlooking a lake. Now the ledge was above large rocks, and as I fell, I was sure I was about to be gravely hurt. Suddenly I felt a large hand on my back that caught me and pushed me up against the wall. Now surprised, I turned around to thank my Savior, and no one was there. I was dangling over the rocks, feeling the hand as if it pushed me straight against the wall until both my feet were secured. Now I cannot explain what happened that day, but I know there was someone or something there that saved me. That's interesting.
That is interesting.
Same kind of thing, like me.
Same type of thing, yeah.
Move, a warning or something. Another person says, twice in my 20s I fell asleep while driving on a highway. Just in the nick of time, a voice from the back seat said my name in a very commanding tone, waking me up so I could hit the brakes. I'm still very much alive, 76, and I figure somebody up there likes me. It's dangerous alone to be driving when you're that tired, but
yeah,
the fact that someone keeps waking you up,
yeah,
that's interesting. Keep saying their name. Here's another one that says, I'm disabled and I survived the attacks on the Twin Towers in New York City.
Wow.
I was buried under the debris for about 15 hours, but I was never alone. I kept hearing from a voice that said his name was Michael. When I was weakest, he would just keep talking to him. When I was rescued, I found out that there was never a man named Michael anywhere in the area, and I still wonder the voice that saved me from becoming another death on that terrible day. So that's interesting.
Could have been Michael the Archangel of protection.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Very much so. That's interesting, though.
That is interesting.
Keeping the person engaged and awake rather than fall asleep and pass away or something.
Especially somebody disabled, not able to help themselves.
That was my biggest fear when that happened. All I could think of was the people. Not so much. I know it's horrible that the people died, but the people that were trapped that were still alive in the debris.
That's awful. I can't even imagine that.
Okay, so this is another story. It says, when my husband was in his 20s, he fell asleep while driving and crashed into a telephone pole. He was hurt and remembered a teenage kid knocking on his window telling him he called the police and not to get out of the car because there were live wires everywhere. When my husband was finally rescued, there was no sign of the kid. The police said that no one called them, they just came because the power was out. Not only that, but they said there was no way anyone could have gotten close to the car on account of the wires. And if my husband had tried to get out of the car, they probably would have killed him. She said, my husband was so vividly remembers the kid, he believes he was real, but his mom believes it was just his guardian angel.
Just like possibly,
Yep.
possibility.
Again,
yeah.
stressful situation.
Stressful
danger.
situation, yeah.
Okay, here's another one. A few years ago, we were on a family vacation in Virginia Beach. The water was pretty choppy, and the waves kept knocking me down before I could even get properly in, so as I was pregnant, I decided to relax on the sand instead. My husband and my 3 siblings went out swimming, and without realizing it, my husband and one of my sisters got pulled out pretty far.
Ooh.
They were far from everyone else swimming, and the lifeguard was blowing the whistle that they need to come back in. The water was so rough they were having a hard time getting any closer to shore and genuinely thought they might drown.
Yikes.
Now, my sister is pretty petite, so my husband ended up carrying her piggyback style back to shore. They were both pretty scared and tired, and my husband told me that something or someone helped them make it back, and it felt that someone gave him a push. The next day, there was a perfect handprint on his back on the right side by his shoulder blade. It looked like a reverse sunburn. In the picture shape of a hand, someone was definitely looking out for them that day.
And that someone was far out too, so who if they couldn't... Wow, okay.
Yeah. Here's the story. I was dancing with my friend at a foam party. I'm not sure what a foam party is.
What's a foam party?
I guess maybe they have those giant foam club things, you know what I mean? Like almost like pool toys.
Okay.
I'm guessing. I don't know. Which is where they hang a machine from the ceiling that dumps tons of bubbles onto the dance floor.
Okay, that makes sense.
The foam was super deep under the machine, and the floor was super slippery because of the soapy bubbles. Now, my friend slipped into the foam, and I fell down to the floor under the bubbles with her. When I tried to breathe, it was like I was drowning. The foam filled my lungs like water.
Ew.
I couldn't open my eyes. My feet and hands kept slipping, so I couldn't even stand up, and no one could hear us choking and screaming over the music. I was slipping all over the floor, holding onto my friend's shirt, and just as I thought we were going to drown in the bubbles, someone pulled us up. It was as though we'd been lifted or pushed, because there was no way anyone could have grabbed me by the arm. I was way too slippery. Heather and I couldn't even hold hands. Our skin was so slick. I was lucky just to hang onto her shirt. We came out of the bubbles, choking and gasping, covered in soap, clinging to each other. When I wiped my eyes clear, there was no one there except the other people dancing around us. They were all oblivious to us, though. They didn't even know we'd fallen, and no one even seen anyone pull us up, nor did anyone ask if we were okay.
That sounds awful.
Needless to say, I never went to a foam party again.
I've never even heard of somebody giving a party like that.
I didn't know there was such a thing, but I'm sure we know.
It doesn't even sound safe now.
What if you're dancing and it's soap all over the floor?
I know.
I don't
you have to be careful.
You're kind of asking for it, I think, if you go to a foam party.
Either that or they should have people watching to make sure everybody's okay.
Yeah. I just think it's a weird...
It's a weird kind of... Yeah, it's weird. Yeah.
Okay, here's another guy. A story about someone up in Seattle. I was driving north from Portland to Seattle for a last-minute appointment. I was very tired, and the rainy weather wasn't helping at all. I was using my phone as a GPS, and it fell off the mounter dashboard holder and onto the footwell below. I was on a major freeway, and in my tired state, I started to scramble to find the phone. I know it's dumb, but I didn't know where I was going, and at this point, I could barely see the road as I was looking down for the device, and all of a sudden, I felt my steering wheel jerk to the left and then to the right again. I popped back up to see what was going on. I narrowly missed hitting a road worker by maybe a foot by swerving out and back in the lane again. I'd not moved the wheel. Grandma used to say, "Don't drive faster than your angels can fly," and I could feel her in that moment.
Wise saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Wise grandma.
Yeah. Okay, this is another story about somebody college driving. I was driving back to college my freshman year, and I totally got lost in a heavily wooded area. This was before GPS and cell phones, so I was stuck on the roads alone. I couldn't find my way to the highway, and I was looking and the sun was setting, and a huge storm broke out, and it started pouring rain.
Oh, yuck.
Now, the rain was so heavy I could barely see the road. Suddenly, a house with all the lights on appeared. It was the only house I'd seen for miles. So against my better judgment, I parked the car and went running for the door, and the house had a fence but no gate to open, so I hopped the fence and started banging on the door asking for help. A woman opened the door and invited me inside. The house was empty except for a big beanbag chair in the kitchen. She said they just moved in and her husband had left to get something, so it was just us. I was soaking wet, so she offered me a change of clothes and poured me a cup of tea. She let me use her phone to call my parents, but they didn't answer, so I left her number on the machine so they could call her back and thank her. She said I was really close to the highway, but I understood I had already had a rough night, so she offered to drive and guide me to the highway so that I wouldn't get lost again. Turns out, if I had just kept driving another minute up the road, I would have hit the highway. My mom called the number I gave her the next day, but we got an error saying the number did not exist. Despite having driven that road many times later in my college career, I never saw that house again.
I've heard of that, where people live in apartments or there's a house there, and there's people who help, and then they come back.
Gone, or they're
never
gone.
There. They don't live there, or the house never existed.
Exactly. It's almost like a Twilight Zone episode, isn't it?
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. Okay, one more. So years ago, I was heading back by train from my parents' house to a university, another college student. It was late, and I had my head resting on the window with my eyes closed. Suddenly, a voice started telling me to move. It got louder and more urgent, but when I opened my eyes, there was no one yelling at me on the train. The other few passengers were all minding their business. The voice in my head got louder and louder, more and more urgent. I felt silly moving, but I finally couldn't ignore the voice any longer. So I scooted a seat over and sat upright. Just then a bullet came through the train window right where my head had been.
Yikes.
I'd have been done for it if I'd have stayed where I was.
That's a close call.
To me, that's amazing, because that means it's not a situation that you could see coming, that maybe you could have avoided it on your own. Like, oh, I shouldn't be here. It's dangerous. I shouldn't do this. This is a minuscule fraction of a second that a bullet was going to come through the window and right into your head.
Right.
So who knew that bullet was going to happen in the first place?
Obviously somebody who's...
Isn't that unusual?
Very unusual, but it's obviously from somebody who's looking from another dimension and not from another time and space and sees it.
Another plane of existence almost.
Right, exactly.
I don't know. I haven't had any ones where someone's helped me and then I found out they were never there. I've never had that experience myself.
I have.
Just like I said, the ones I've described to you. My mom had the one in the hospital, the hospice, where the guy who sort of looked like a priest but wasn't. Mm-hmm. Came and visited her 2 or 3 times. And
I remember you telling me that.
Nurses said there's nobody here ever that would have come like that. So to me, that's third man syndrome. That's, again, somebody comforting you, saying, it's okay, you've done enough, don't fight it, this is your time. So it's just, there's someone clearly around us at all times.
Definitely. Yes. And I'm glad of it, because I've had friends tell me that their guardian angels or whoever are their spirit guides have been working overtime, and sometimes the things I do, I just wonder if they're covering their face, going, "Oh, here she goes again."
Well, no, partly. I mean, we're into this stuff anyway. Paranormal, unexplained.
Right.
We do the podcast.
Yes.
I mean, we're aware of things all the time.
Absolutely.
A lot of other people don't even think about this stuff.
They don't.
So they wouldn't. When it happens to them, it's even more baffling. To us, it's like, oh, that was interesting.
Right, and we take the time to talk about it.
Yeah.
But for most people, it doesn't come up in their daily lives unless it's something unusual and really out of place. Yeah. So
that's. I mean, the experiences I have, I remember them very, very well. Like, I our paranormal news article I just did about that house where they had the party next door.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And whenever I stayed, the 2 times I stayed overnight at the Mackey Mansion in Virginia City in Nevada.
Oh, I've always wanted to visit that.
It was me and one other person. Each time I went, one was during the winter, one was during the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And in the middle of the night at 2 a.m., I would wake up. It's so loud. It's a party downstairs. There's people laughing. There's piano. I hear dishes. I hear just lots of party going on downstairs. And we were up in the upper bedrooms. Flash forward a year and a half later, 2 a.m., same thing. I wake up in the middle of the night. And this time the other person with me wakes up at the same time. And she doesn't know why she's woken up. And I said, it's a party downstairs. There's piano. There's laughter. There's clinking glasses. And it was the same time, the same house, the same time of night, a year and a half apart. And I just thought, wow, and this is an example of that, where the party's going on next door at the bank, but it's closed. So what used to be there? Was it something else?
Well, remember when we had the station, when we used to work at the station?
Yeah.
And it was at the Oddfellows building, and I was coming down the elevator, and on the other side, where there's bricks, where you have to
where
walk
the
around.
furnace area. Yeah.
I heard somebody talking, and I thought somebody was talking on a cell phone, because you know how people... They talk loud on their cell phones because they go to a corner, they don't think anybody's listening.
Yep.
And then I went in to start the show with you.
Yeah.
And you said you heard the same thing, but we looked and nobody was there.
I remember that. I totally forgot about.
And then when Linda was a regular on the show, she said she came down and she heard the same thing, but she looked and there was no one there.
Yeah, to me that's...
So somebody was having a conversation and we heard it quite clearly, but there was nobody there. I mean, we've seen people there together. I've seen people in the basement. We've seen people there together, and you've seen people by yourself. Yeah.
Where someone just walked by the station, and I got up and I looked out the door, and there's nobody there. Nobody getting on the elevator.
And the manager of the station, he used to have the cameras downstairs, where in the basement, so that he could see what was going on.
Yeah.
And he saw somebody, like a figure, walking by, and he called the police because he thought somebody was breaking in.
Yep.
And he looked, and then they came, and there was nobody there. And he came, there was no one there. Everything was normal.
Remember when we saw someone in the booth next to us?
Yes.
While we were doing the show
I remember
live,
that.
We're like, wait, who's next door? You're like, well, the light's up, but nobody's over there. And we saw somebody.
We saw somebody walk in, yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty wild.
That was.
So, again, third man syndrome. I don't really know why it's called that still, but maybe I'll find out and we'll point that out in a later podcast episode. But I mean, it's experience. I think everybody probably has these experiences. I don't think everybody really understands when they happen. Some people do. We do.
Yeah, we do.
But I'm sure there's people that don't.
And if there's anybody who's listening to this who has a story that they'd like to relate to us, I'd like to hear more about people's third man experiences.
Yeah,
whatever they may
maybe
be.
We can do a live third man experience show or something.
I would love to have people call in and talk about it.
Yep,
yeah.
That's a good idea. All right, folks, that's this week's episode of Ecto Portal. And until next week, check us out on TikTok and be right back here, ectoportal.com, for our next podcast episode. Goodbye.
Bye. See you next week.
Royalty-free, copyright-free music by Kevin MacLeod and Ross Bugden. Be sure to visit us at www.ectoportal.com. Check out our archives on YouTube and head on over for new episodes to ectoportal.podbean.com.